think that becomes very, very clear when you analyze the actual data of what happens through time. And back to the military, you know, I had no disrespect for anyone in the military. I do stand by that, holistically speaking, while protection is a firm reality in this culture, while it's just the nature of the system creates the need to have protection. In the long run, it's not a solution. It's not a solution. So the anti-violence issue is so important for everyone to realize, and the middle ground of defending it by intermediary issues is unacceptable. Just to say that we need it now is not a solution. It's not a point that holds any validity when you actually put things in a honest view. So to conclude my long-winded statement, the answer is that no one should join the military. I interact with people in the military all the time, and I tell them just leave. If everyone leaves, no one goes to war. Imagine there's no one. Let me say one more thing. People say, oh, Hitler. We need the military to defend against people like Hitler. Hitler brainwashed hundreds of thousands of soldiers to follow him. If these soldiers could think for themselves and they had been taught how to think critically, none of them would even pay attention to what Hitler had to say. That's the way you have to think about it. And one more final thing. Poverty in this country is the ultimate driver for personnel for the military. The people in power want poverty because they know they can get their arsenal of cannon fodder from the poor, while they pretend that it's for college education. Anyway, sorry.
Next question. Yes, going on with the notion that human beings aren't meant to kill, I was wondering if you were ever planning on specifically delving into our dependence on animals and the animal industry.
I think there's a great deal of brutality, of course, in the animal industry. I think in the future there are many other ways of manufacturing protein-based materials that do not involve killing animals. There's a lot of science through in vitro development. There's things that really aren't being pushed forward right now for that type of development. I think in the future, if we were continuing a humane path, there would be no need to kill or slaughter any animals in the future. That it's certainly a possibility for general nutrition and to maintain texture. I mean, they're printing, speaking of 3D printing, they print organs now. It's very subtle, but they're able to print organs. You could print meat. Because you go line by line, cell by cell. You can make an imitation steak that is 100% the exact quality that you get from a cow. So,
I love science. Would you plan on displaying that in the film?
Well, I made that point in the film, but there's only so much I can cover. I feel that is a relevant point, but I don't necessarily think it's almost a given in my mind. I mean, I understand the importance of it. I understand the issue at hand, and not to mention the fur industry. It's also horrifying beyond the meat industry. I mean, there's all sorts of other levels to it too. Just keep one thing in mind. We're coming out of a position of evolution. Human beings have had to eat meat in order to survive in their nutrition, but we're changing. We're developing new tactics and new techniques. So I don't put anyone down that eats meat. I don't eat much meat. Occasionally I will, though. It's just the way I've been raised. I'm sorry. But, I prefer not to eat meat, frankly, but I get in patterns of behavior where I can't quite function. It's really a disability of not having time to efficiently be healthy. But in the future, I see this evolution occurring where you can create the nutrition, so I'll leave it at that.
Next question, please.
Well, I had a similar question to that. As far as particulars in the new society, as far as would weapons be allowed to be produced, as well as something like meat, even though these might be looked down on by the majority of the society? And also on a side note, just an observation, how come other than Roxanne Meadows you don't include many women in the movies?
It's not a choice. Unfortunately, a lot of the categories of data and the people that pursue these types of academic interests tend not to be women. They tend to be male-dominated. As another point of evolution, it's been a very short period of time before women have been given any real credence of development of what their role is. You have to remember, it was 50, 60, 70 years ago, there was a very firm difference, and in fact, other countries, it very much still exists. So it's not a decision on my part to do that, please. I certainly, I would,
an
in fact,
observation I was making. I wasn't accusing
no,
of
I know
anything.
that.
It was just something I noticed that there.
I can't, for the sake of information, I can't just say, oh, I need more women. You know. But,
Even though you just inserted yourself in the next Zeitgeist film. Good plug.
But my original question was about weapons.
so your question is, would people be allowed to have weapons? Allowed? Are you? See, the thing is about the issue of weapons and all these things that we assume are givens in society. Culturally speaking, we assume that these things are important to consider because of the fact that they're simply culturally dominant. As time moves forward, I don't think anyone would even know what a weapon is. If you go back to early Christopher Columbus' time, when he first came to America, he showed them a gun and a spear, even a sword, excuse me. These indigenous people didn't know what the hell a sword even was. They didn't have the violence. They didn't have tools of violence.
But we know now. We know.
No, I know, but my point is that if this has occurred in the past, we can evolve back into a society that is not, based on these lunatics that think that everyone should walk around with a gun, and that's going to somehow make them safe. You know what I mean? And to the effect that the change is possible to go into a society to move into a society where there's no need to even consider to have some kind of weapon and protection like that. I mean, I see that being extremely possible.
What about like bow and arrow for recreation?
Well, that's fine. The only real threats are the threats to humanity as a whole. So if there's ever such a thing as, quote, a military establishment, it would be guided in things towards, say, a meteorite that might come and hurt us. That's about the only real attribute I can think of where you can rationalize the use of weapons. But when it comes to human behavior, when you think about the causal attributes of what violence is, how it accumulates, the monetary system, America has 30 to 300 times more violence than any other country. Why is that? It has to do with the extreme division of rich and poor. When you resolve all those issues, you begin to make a humane society. No one would even think about wanting to own a gun. Most people don't today. I don't want a gun. But most people would be much more distant in the future. So that's all I can really say. Things we find as cultural norms today are not necessarily empirical. We just have to remember that we just assume that. It's a tendency of every single generation to think that everything that's happening around them is empirically finite, and that's the way it is, and the way it's always going to be. It's simply not true.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
I always begin with gratitude. So thank you for living your mission, for contributing to the evolution. I am absolutely in profound awe at the depth at which you went into the subconscious programming from the limbic birth implant. And my question is, what support do you need from the other ambassador wings that are all around the globe? We call ourselves compassion economy or generosity economy, or what Lewis Hyde calls erotic commerce, based on eros, which is the authentic power of the human heart. And willing to build bridges.
Well, building bridges is critically important, and that's a very beautiful statement. What do I need in that regard? Well, I'll bring it down to a slightly more practical level, to the effect that I only can hope that the Zeitgeist movement, which is this initial attempt, I don't know of any other movement that exists of the global nature that's attempting something like this and has the courage to present the observations that it does. Bridging differences, I can only hope that people will basically come into the movement, not say, oh, we are in partnership with the movement. I don't like that. I think people need to absorb into it and say, I work with other movements, but I'm also in the movement. Not, I'm in the movement that's a partner with the movement. We don't want division. We want to establish a unified front I'll leave it at that. That's really what needs to happen.
So the other ambassadors would get connected to your chapter leaders and begin that rapport?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Very sweet.
It's done.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you again. My question pertains specifically to uniform commercial